What happens when America's sweetheart, the woman whose smile has been lighting up movie screens for over 3 decades, sits down for what should be a celebration of her legendary career, only to be blindsided by an unexpected attacker from within the sisterhood. What you're about to witness is one of the most shocking confrontations ever captured on daytime television. The moment when Julia Roberts, the Oscar-winning actress who defined romantic comedy for an entire generation, found herself under assault, not from the usual suspect, but from someone she considered a friend. The studio went dead silent. The famous smile disappeared. And Whoopi Goldberg discovered that even America's sweetheart has limits, and pushing past them has devastating consequences. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because trust me, you're going to want to talk about this one. The morning had started with genuine excitement at the View Studios. Julia Roberts was coming on the show, and everyone from the producers to the interns was buzzing with anticipation. At 56 years old, Julia remained one of the most beloved actresses in Hollywood. A woman whose career had spanned 4 decades and included some of the most iconic films in cinema history. Pretty Woman, Aaron Brockovich, My Best Friend's Wedding, Notting Hill, Steel Magnolias. She was quite simply a legend. Julia arrived at the studio with the same radiant energy that had made her America's sweetheart since 1990. Her famous smile was already warming up the production staff before she even reached the green room. She hugged crew members she remembered from previous appearances, asked about their families, complimented the young assistants on their work. This was the Julia Roberts the world had fallen in love with, genuinely warm and present in a way that many celebrities simply weren't. The studio lights were warm as Julia took her seat at the famous table. She greeted each host with genuine warmth, saving a special hug for Whoopi, whom she had known for decades. The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes, and she accepted it with the humble grace that had always been her trademark. Our next guest needs absolutely no introduction. Joy Behar began with obvious admiration. She's won an Oscar. She's been America's sweetheart for over 30 years, and she's here to talk about her incredible new project. Please welcome the one and only Julia Roberts. The applause continued as Julia settled into her chair, that famous megawatt smile lighting up the studio. Thank you so much. What a beautiful welcome. I always love coming here. It feels like visiting old friends. Sarah Haynes asked about the new film, and Julia spoke with her characteristic warmth about the project, the director, her co-stars. She was engaging and funny, self-deprecating in a way that made her feel accessible despite her enormous stardom. For a few minutes, everything felt exactly as it should. Then Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, and something in the atmosphere shifted dramatically. So Julia, Whoopi began, her voice carrying a weight that made the other hosts glance over with slight concern. You've been doing this a long time, longer than a lot of people realize, and you've had this image, this America's sweetheart thing for most of that time. But I have to ask you something I've been wondering for years. How much of that is real? And how much is just really good PR? The question was jarring in its directness, especially coming from Whoopi. Julia's smile flickered almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained warm when she responded. I'm not sure what you mean, Whoopi. I try to be myself in every situation. What you see is pretty much what you get with me. Whoopi's expression didn't soften. See, that's what I'm talking about. That answer right there. It's perfect. It's charming. It gives nothing away. You've been doing that for 30 years, and I'm just wondering if there's a real person under all that polish, or if the smile is all there is. The accusation of superficiality seemed to catch Julia off guard. The audience had gone quiet, sensing that this wasn't the typical friendly interview they had expected. Whoopi, I'm not sure where this is coming from, Julia said, her voice carrying a new note of caution. We've known each other for a long time. You know me. You know this is who I am. Do I know you? Whoopi's laugh was short and carried no warmth. We've been in the same rooms at the same parties for 30 years, and I'm not sure I know anything about you that isn't in your official bio. That's not friendship, Julia. That's coexistence. The other hosts were exchanging uncomfortable glances now. Joy looked like she wanted to intervene, but couldn't find an opening. Sarah seemed frozen in her seat. This was Whoopi Goldberg, the moderator of The View, attacking a guest in a way that nobody had anticipated. I'm a private person, Julia said, her voice becoming quieter but more controlled. I always have been. I don't think there's anything wrong with keeping some things for myself and my family. Private is one thing, we'll be pressed. But you've built this entire image around being warm and accessible and everyone's best friend. And then you keep everyone at arm's length. That's not privacy. That's manipulation. You figured out exactly how much to give to make people love you while never actually letting anyone in. The accusation landed like a slap. Julia sat very still for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice had changed, the warmth replaced by something cooler and more guarded. I'm not going to sit here and apologize for protecting my family and my privacy, Whoopi. I've been in this business for 35 years. I've seen what happens to people who give everything to the public. I've made choices about what I share and what I keep for myself, and I don't think that makes me a manipulator. But that's exactly what it is, Whoopi continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension. You've manipulated your image so carefully that nobody even questions it anymore. America's sweetheart. The girl next door who happened to become the biggest movie star in the world. But let's be honest about how you got there. Let's talk about Kiefer Sutherland. The mention of that name seemed to hit Julia somewhere deep. The studio went absolutely silent. That was over 30 years ago, Whoopi. I'm not going to discuss ancient history on television. Ancient history that defined your entire public image. Whoopi shot back. You left Kiefer Sutherland 3 days before your wedding. 3 days. And then you ran off with his best friend. The tabloids went crazy, but somehow you came out of it looking like the victim. Like you were just following your heart. That's when I first realized how good you were at this game. Julia's famous smile had completely disappeared now. In its place was something the audience had rarely seen. A woman who was genuinely angry, but trying to maintain control. I was 23 years old. I made mistakes. I hurt people. I've never claimed to be perfect. But I don't think my romantic decisions from 3 decades ago are appropriate fodder for your entertainment, Whoopi. But they're part of the story, aren't they? Whoopi's voice was rising now. They're part of how Julia Roberts became Julia Roberts. The string of relationships, the men you've collected and discarded. And then suddenly, you're this devoted wife and mother, and everyone's supposed to forget everything that came before. Joy Behar finally found her voice. Whoopi, maybe we should move on to talking about Julia's film. No, Joy, I think this needs to be said. Whoopi's eyes never left Julia's face. I've watched you navigate this industry for 30 years, Julia. I've watched you get opportunities that other people had to fight twice as hard for. And I've always wondered if you had any idea how much your smile and your pretty face opened doors that were closed to the rest of us. The implication of privilege, possibly racial privilege, hung heavy in the air. Julia's expression shifted to something that mixed hurt with dawning understanding. Is that what this is about, Whoopi? You think I've had it easy because of how I look? I think you've never had to think about it, Whoopi replied. I think you floated through this industry on charm and beauty and never once considered that other people were fighting battles you couldn't even see. Do you have any idea what it was like for black actresses in the 9S while you were being crowned America's sweetheart? Do you have any idea how many roles I didn't even get to audition for because they went automatically to women who looked like you? The conversation had shifted into territory that nobody had expected. Julia seemed to be processing what Whoopi was saying, her expression cycling through several emotions before settling on something thoughtful. Whoopi, if this conversation is really about representation and the struggles that black actresses have faced in Hollywood, I'm genuinely willing to have that conversation. It's an important conversation, but I don't think attacking me personally is the way to have it. I'm not attacking you, Whoopi said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm asking you to acknowledge something you've never had to acknowledge. That your success isn't just about talent. It's about fitting a certain image that Hollywood has always preferred. And the rest of us, the ones who didn't fit that image, we had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Julia was quiet for a long moment. And when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that surprised everyone. You're right that I've had advantages that other people haven't had. I've never denied that. But you don't know anything about what I've had to overcome, Whoopi. You don't know about growing up with parents who divorced in the ugliest way possible. You don't know about watching my father die when I was 10 years old. You don't know about the complicated relationship with my brother that has played out in tabloids for decades. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. You don't know about my sister Nancy, my half-sister who struggled her entire life and who died by suicide in 2014. Who left a note blaming me publicly for not helping her enough. Do you know what it's like to bury your sister and then read in the papers that she blamed you for her death? The studio had gone completely silent. This was territory that Julia Roberts never discussed publicly. wounds that she had kept carefully protected for years. I've smiled through all of it because that's how I survive. That's how I get through the day. Not because I'm manipulating anyone, but because the alternative is falling apart and I have 3 children who need their mother to be strong. So, don't you dare sit there and tell me that my smile is fake, that my warmth is calculated, that I've had it easy. You have no idea what's behind that smile, Whoopi. None. Whoopi seemed momentarily taken back by the raw emotion, but she pressed on. I'm sorry about your sister. I am. But that doesn't change the fact that you've benefited from a system that has consistently undervalued people who don't look like you, and using your personal tragedies to deflect from that conversation is exactly the kind of manipulation I'm talking about. Something snapped in Julia. Then the careful control she had maintained throughout the interview finally broke. Manipulation. You want to talk about manipulation, Whoopi? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you've positioned yourself as the moral authority on this show for years, passing judgment on everyone who walks through that door. Let's talk about how you've defended people who didn't deserve defending and attacked people who didn't deserve attacking. Let's talk about your own controversies, your own mistakes, your own moments where you said things that hurt people and then had to apologize. She stood up, and the movement seemed to electrify the entire studio. I came here today as a favor. As someone who has always respected this show and considered you a colleague, maybe even a friend, and you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to tear me apart for crimes I didn't commit, for being successful, for being private, for surviving the best way I knew how. Her voice was shaking now, but with anger rather than tears. You want to have a conversation about representation in Hollywood? I'll have that conversation. It's important. There's work to be done. But that conversation doesn't require you to destroy me in the process. That's not activism, Whoopi. That's personal. And I don't know what I've done to you over the years to deserve this. But I'm not going to sit here and take it. Whoopi's expression had shifted to something harder to read. Julia, I think you're overreacting. I'm just asking questions that need to be asked. No, you're not. Julia's voice was firm. You're settling some score that I don't even understand. You're using your platform to humiliate me for reasons that have nothing to do with journalism or important conversations about race and representation. This is personal for you, and I deserve to know why. The challenge hung in the air. Whoopi was silent for a moment, and when she spoke, some of the aggression had drained from her voice. Maybe it is personal. Maybe I've watched you glide through this industry for 30 years and wondered why it was so easy for you when it was so hard for me. Maybe I've resented the fact that you get to be America's sweetheart, while the rest of us have to prove ourselves over and over again. Is that what you want to hear? Julia's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. I understand that resentment, Whoopi. I do. But I'm not the enemy. I'm not the system that made things harder for you. I'm just a woman who has tried to build a career and raise a family and survive in an industry that chews people up and spits them out. Taking your frustration out on me doesn't fix anything. It just hurts both of us. She turned to address the audience directly. I want to say something to everyone watching. The conversation about representation in Hollywood is important. The conversation about how certain people have had advantages that others haven't had is important. But that conversation requires nuance and good faith, not ambushes designed to humiliate individuals for the entertainment of others. She looked back at Whoopi. I've admired your career for decades, Whoopi. You've broken barriers and opened doors and proven that talent can triumph over prejudice. But what you've done today isn't worthy of that legacy. You've attacked someone who came here in good faith, accused her of sins she didn't commit, and tried to reduce her entire life to a pretty smile that you've decided is fake. She gathered her things with quiet dignity. My smile isn't fake. It's how I've survived losing my father, burying my sister, weathering public humiliations that would have broken most people. It's how I show up for my kids every day, even when I'm falling apart inside. It's not manipulation, it's strength. And I'm sorry you can't see that. She paused at the edge of the stage. I hope someday we can have the real conversation, Whoopi. The one about how we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. The one about how women in this industry can support each other instead of attacking each other. But that conversation requires honesty about what's really going on. And today wasn't honest. Today was something else entirely. She turned to Joy and Sarah. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry it ended this way. And with that, Julia Roberts walked off the stage of The View, leaving behind a stunned silence that seemed to swallow the entire studio. The audience sat frozen, unsure how to process what they had witnessed. Joy looked shocked. Sarah looked close to tears. And Whoopi Goldberg sat at the table with an expression that was impossible to read, like someone who had started something she hadn't expected to finish. What had started as a routine promotional appearance had become something far more complicated. A confrontation not between predictable adversaries, but between two women who had both struggled in their own ways, who had both achieved success against odds, and who had somehow ended up on opposite sides of a conflict that neither fully understood. The aftermath of that interview would dominate entertainment news for weeks. Clips of the confrontation would be analyzed and debated endlessly. Think pieces would be written about privilege, about representation, about the complicated dynamics between women in Hollywood. Some would praise Whoopi for asking difficult questions about systemic advantages. Many more would question whether the conversation had been conducted in good faith or whether personal resentments had poisoned what could have been a meaningful dialogue. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the conversation it started about how women treat each other in spaces of power. Julia Roberts had been attacked by someone she considered an ally. And in defending herself, she had revealed vulnerabilities that she had carefully protected for decades. She had shown that America's sweetheart was not a mask, but a survival mechanism, a way of moving through a world that had dealt her more pain than most people ever knew. And Whoopi Goldberg had revealed something, too. Something about the resentments that can build up over a lifetime of fighting battles that others don't have to fight. Whether those resentments justified the attack was a question that viewers would debate for a long time to come. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Whoopi Goldberg out of line, or did she have valid points about privilege in Hollywood? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely leave you speechless.